Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sharpest Call of Duty. That's a different podcast. Sharpest Call of Duty League podcast. My name is Robert. I am joined by my co-host, as always, CDLMetrics. Yeah, look forward to another week of COD here.
Yeah. We didn't get a chance to talk last week, but still, yeah, enjoyed the first week of the Major 2 qualifiers. We're back to a full 11 match weekends, which is awesome.
Yes.
So that's great. Yeah, 3 on Friday, 4 on Saturday, 4 on Sunday, and we're going to have that for the next 5 weeks before we get to Major 2. So yeah, a lot of COD to look forward to. I feel like we're kind of in that, I don't want to say dead period for sports because I'm a huge college basketball fan and like we are hitting like peak season for that. March Madness, obviously, right around the corner. So super stoked with that. But other than that, like unless you really like golf or like NBA regular season stuff, like there's not a ton. So yeah, COD can carry us through for a while, I'd say.
Yeah. I will say though, with the Olympics, you're kind of going like back and forth between Olympics and
Oh,
like Call of
true.
Duty, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's been good. I've been enjoying it so far. But anyways, last week, so unfortunately, as CDL Metrics mentioned, we were unable to go last week. Again, we come here to discuss the lines. There were no lines. There were no lines until literally I think Thursday night, Friday night.
Yeah.
Like when a line comes out on Thursday night, we don't have time to schedule a podcast. So we basically made our picks and we put them out on Twitter, and we both went 2-1. So that was good. Yeah. Somehow both of our gold picks failed. I feel like we should
hmm
not have them be named after. Gold doesn't mean gold's actually apparently worse than silver and bronze. So, but yeah, no, I mean we both had a pretty good week in terms of that. Koi is just kind of let me get there we go. Koi is kind of in trouble there. This might be the last time that Insight plays for Koi, at least currently so far this season. He might be hitting the bench there. But they struggled against Carolina and in their other game as well. Minnesota came very close to upsetting Optic there. And then FaZe obviously kind of finished off Koi there. Boston did not do very good against Tech Optic, but then they just decided to just beat Riyadh 3-1. So, okay. And then Miami against Vegas.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. They swept FaZe. That's right. Yeah, I was thinking when they played who they play. They played someone else, and who they played. They
Uh,
lost 3-1 to. Oh, Paris, Paris,
they
Paris.
lost. Yes, Paris.
Yes. So yeah, good kind of plays for us. Combined model plays, not as much. Obviously, the Boston stuff that didn't work out too well. Miami map 1, that did work out. Riyadh, yep, we kind of like Riyadh there against Boston. That did not work out. Minnesota money line, that was very very close. I
Yeah.
did take I did take the +1.5, so that didn't really impact me quite as much. But yeah, that still stings a bit. Vancouver +2.5 did hit, but not in map 1 or map 3. Miami +2.5, that definitely hit against Paris there.
Paris.
And then yeah, Cloud9 still struggling a lot. We have yeah. Let's go through the matches here. So what did you notice last week with the
Yeah,
results here?
so actually these are the results from Major 1. I just wanted to
Oh,
throw
okay.
these up because we didn't have a chance to talk about that last week just because we just came back and those lines came in a little late. But I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on what you thought of the major. I know we were both really excited going into it. In my opinion, it was, I'd say, relatively chalky. Like the teams that finished first, second, third were Paris, Optic, and FaZe. And like I think really good chance that you ask a random COD fan who will finish top three, they would say those teams in some order. Maybe that someone would throw Thieves in there, but other than that, like it was not a lot of game fives. I thought that was pretty surprising. Like day one and day two, we had 9 matches, only one went to a game five. Saturday, 1 of 5 matches went to a game five, and then the Sunday was awesome, which was great to see, and honestly cool that like I feel like we don't get it much where the winners bracket final happens. Optic beat Paris very decisively, and then Paris work their way back into the grand finals and actually come out on top in the best of seven format. So a really, really good grand finals. That was one of the better ones we've had in quite some time. And just Sunday in general was really, really entertaining. But I'd say my biggest takeaway for the majority of the major was we had really decisive outcomes in a lot of the series, really like Thursday through Saturday. There were a lot of sweeps, a lot of game four finishes, and not too many like crazy upsets. I know Surge beating Ravens on Friday was a little surprising. Toronto kind of flaming out top 12 was a little surprising, but you look at like what they did, like they didn't get swept in either of their series. They played a couple quality teams. So yeah, I don't know. I'd say overall like a somewhat expected outcomes for the major itself, but just with how many dominant wins there were, that did surprise me.
Yeah. And then moving on to last week, some of those trends kind of carried on. Toronto, obviously, not very strong there. Paris, 2-3-1 wins. That was good. Optic looked a bit weaker there against Minnesota. They did come back, but it probably shouldn't have been that close. Minnesota, again, they were not looking that great going into Major One. They did well in Major One, and they're continuing it, right? Almost taking down the Major One winner. And then 3-0 sweeping Cloud9. That's what you want to see. FaZe, yeah, like FaZe, basically, very weird result from FaZe. They got swept by Miami, and then they swept Toronto. So I don't know what you want to make of that because then Miami turned around and got 3-1 swept by Paris. So I got nothing. Unless what your takeaway is that FaZe is really good against beating bad teams, which to be fair they kind of always have been good at that. Like specifically, maybe FaZe is the new Ultra if that makes sense for our older viewers back from Cold War. But no, the Thieves look a bit better, but still a little shaky. I'd want to see more than a 50-point margin in the hard point against Ravens. Definitely more than the 10 there against Vancouver. But Search was pretty good, as was Overload. So yeah, what else do you have from this past week here?
Yeah, I'd say that, lack of game fives is really apparent. And maybe this is just what we should expect moving forward. Because, yeah, we only had one out of the 11 matches last weekend that went to the full game five. And that was a really good series, right? Optic reverse sweeping Minnesota. And Minnesota had, I think they were up 5-3 in that game five, lost 3 rounds in a row. That one did sting quite a bit. But I think results wise, mostly, again, mostly expected. Like you can point out a couple things here or there that were surprising. Like the fall off for Toronto is one of the bigger like storylines right now, just because they started the year pretty solid, and then since then they've just been losing matches left and right. And against a team like Carolina, right, like you expect a competitive series, and that one really wasn't. Like the hard point was kind of competitive, but a 48-point win is a solid win. And then the game two, game three, not even close. Toronto come back the next day versus a better team in Vegas FaZe. And yeah, even worse results there. So a change had to be made, and some changes are happening. We know that for sure. But other than that, I'd say, yeah, mostly expected. I know, Boston over Riyadh was technically an upset, but like not a crazy one where you like are shocked when it happens. So yeah, otherwise I'd say mostly what you'd expect. LA Thieves looking pretty good. I get, yeah, some of the maps maybe were a little close for their series, but still, like you win 6 maps, only drop one. That's kind of what you expect to see from a team like that against a Surge and a Ravens. So yeah, I'd say mostly expected. Cloud9's debut, okay. Like they got swept by Minnesota, who are a solid team, but they at least showed some fight in that map one and map three. But it's tough to tell with that team because we only saw them once. So yeah.
Yeah. Moving on to that's the next slide, right? Yeah, major two format. So again, as we mentioned before, 6 weeks round robin format. Each team plays 11 matches against all the CDL teams. Bottom two teams do not qualify for the major two tournament. And then it's a 3-day tournament. Teams seeded 7 through 10 will complete in a play-in match, 7 versus 8, 8 versus 9, 7 versus 10, 18 double elimination bracket, same prize pool as Major 1. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. So it's just a single play-in match, no double elimination. It's just like you get one more shot.
Yeah, yeah. So I wanted to get your opinion on this too, and I actually had a good discussion with, I think it was at COD Casuals earlier today about the format and like what people think of the two teams that don't make it at all, and then kind of just going further into that, like the play-in matches for that 7 through 10, it is a totally new format than what we've had in the CDL era. And at a glance, I really like it. I wish the one thing I wish would be like the 11 game round robin we have for each team. Love that. We've been calling for that for years, honestly. Like, can we get a qualifier, period where every team plays every other team once? So the schedules are completely balanced. You get a really large sample size, so you're not going to get any weirdness with seeding. Like, it's going to be clear cut what happened. So I wish we could squeeze the 6 weeks into 5 weeks. If you add, a couple matches a day, or honestly, maybe just one match a day, that might help you get there. But or you might have to broadcast 2 games at once. But either way, I am interested in how this plays out. But yeah, mostly people are like, oh, I feel like the bottom two teams should qualify for the major. Like, how much of a bummer is it that, the teams that are 11th and 12th won't even get a shot to win the major? And I get that. Like, it is kind of nice that we have a lot of these majors for the CDL and every team makes the major no matter what. Any team can win it. At the same time, it does make those qualifiers mean a little more, right? Like, we're going to go into the last week where, I think every team will still be live to make the major, or maybe one team will be eliminated by then. But I think it adds some drama to have two separate cut lines, one for are you in, are you out? And then one for, okay, are you a top six team and you're in the bracket already? Or are you in that 7 to 10 group and you have to fight your way in to begin with and to win any prize money? So interesting. I'm curious to see if they use this again next year, but I kind of like it. And I just wanted to hear your quick thoughts on it too, Robert.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like it too. I think fundamentally 8 versus 9 and 7 versus like the I like the idea. First of all, round robin, 100% endorse that. 100% not a question about that for me. I will say though that excluding the bottom two teams and then having a single play-in match, it seems kind of dumb because again, theoretically, you could be dragging them across country, other side of the planet if you do it in Europe, right? So, or if there's any other times you do this, places you do this, right? So that seems a bit crazy just for that. I understand the point of saying, okay, you're clearly not one of the top teams. You played every other team. You're clearly not one of the top teams. You're gone. I understand that. But at the same point in time, it allowed you to have a longer weekend. It allowed you the matches to start on like Thursday. You got extra matches on Thursday. Then you had extra matches on Friday. Now we're just getting like what 2 matches on Thursday, 2 matches on Friday, and then you just do 18 on like it's a more compact. I would just rather, for me, it's always just like I'd rather just have more teams, more games. I'd rather that rather than oh okay let's find a way. Like I understand the like okay you clearly aren't one of the best. You shouldn't do this, but the problem is that you're trying to like again overall positive change. I support the change. That's totally fine. But I think fundamentally that you should like you're trying to basically try to fit a sports regular season into all of this with the CDL points. And just the inability for those teams to even have a shot at CDL points is like that's I mean outside of the games that they played through the weeks, right? Like you're like for some of you, you're basically saying to some teams you're just not going to make champs. Basically, like if you're already like if you're Vancouver and you're already not and you're like you're basically cut out for bottom two. What are you doing, right? Like what's the point here? Like you could be coming out of major two with like next to no points, and then everybody else has all these other points, and then you're just done. And like to be fair, there's an argument that should be the case. But in Call of Duty, there's no tanking. You're not getting a better draft pick, right? It's all about who you sign and who you don't sign, right? So I don't know. I feel like you have to like what happens if what happens if Vancouver says like in basically the week after Major 2 they say all right screw it, we're getting rid of everyone on our team and we're going to sign 4 brand new guys, right? And then all of a sudden they're a good team, right? Well then that team can't do anything, right? that team builds up. Maybe they do something in Major Three. Maybe they make it to. Maybe they get to winners bracket in Major Three. Maybe they don't. Maybe they narrowly make like maybe they make the losers bracket and they win a couple of rounds in losers round in Major Three. Then Major Four, they make it to the winners bracket, but then they get knocked out like in the top four. Maybe they get knocked out on like Sunday or something. Well, they don't have enough points to advance, so they can't make it. Right? Like I that's what I kind of dislike about that is the fact that like in Call of Duty you can have your team can be completely different from one point of the season to the other point of the season. And I feel like structuring a tournament this way kind of really disincentivizes you to make any changes. You're just kind of like, yeah, we're done. It's done, right? Your season's just done at this point. So again, I get it. I love the round robin. I love that. It's great. Massively in favor of that. But I think that what's the point in dragging these teams so far just to play one game? Because two of these teams are going to be dragged somewhere. I'm not sure where is this. Where is this major? Is it in? It's in Europe, isn't it?
Birmingham, UK. Yeah, it
Yeah. So
is a long ways away.
you're going to drag 8 people and support staff to Birmingham, England, which again not the worst thing ever, but still it's pretty far away. You're going to drag them there to play one game, and then if they lose, then that's it. They're done. Like I don't.
Yeah, no, I totally get that argument. That's the one thing that I'm kind of caught up on too, is like maybe we can format it a little better. I don't know if, and I think including like every team in the major two, like the CDL could have easily done that where it's like we're going to do a 6 week round robin format, and then that just is going to go into a normal major where every team's there, top eight start in winners bracket, bottom four start in losers bracket. But even still, right, like four teams are going to be eliminated immediately. I guess not immediately because you play those winners bracket games first, and then the Friday games are the losers bracket games. So if you start in losers bracket, you get there a day early. You don't have to compete. But even still, four teams are showing up and getting chopped immediately. So I don't know. There's that whole thing. That's just the tricky part with having a double elim bracket where a third of the league isn't getting the benefit of the double elim. So I don't know. Maybe there's another way to do it where somehow every team starts in the winners bracket, or you do like pool play after the round robin, but that just feels like maybe it's too many like qualifier matches at that point. And I know what you're saying about like these major two qualifiers and major two are like overweighted when you look back at the end of the season and go, okay, here's the CDL points for each team. Obviously, major two is a giant chunk of that because it's 11 out of the 28 qualifier matches that each team plays. And right, major two itself is only, exclusive to 10 teams. And of those 10, really only 8 of those are earning CDL points and prize money anyway. So it's a tricky fine line. I think the CDL is good for testing this out. I don't expect them to copy this exact format going into next year and just using that from now on. But I think this is a good like starting point at least for the CDL to move going forward. One other thing I did want to mention, like Major 2 will be a little overweight in terms of how much it affects your CDL point total in the end, because Major 3 and Major 4 only have 5 qualifiers each. And those majors are just our standard majors. I think Major 3 might be a pro-am, but other than that, they're like pretty normal format to what we're used to. There will also be minor tournaments for Major 3 and Major 4. And the CDL commissioner mentioned in the preseason video that they put together, like, we want those minors late in the year to add as like a kicker for the race for champs. And I totally get that because every team will be at the minors, but the CDL points that get distributed from that aren't, super, like consequential or anything because only the top 3, I think, will get CDL points anyway. So interested to see how that plays out. And that's still months away, but I do want to give the CDL props for at least trying some new stuff this year and seeing what works well. And I'm sure we'll have a stronger opinion on it as we get towards the end of the season for sure.
Yeah, I think if there was like, I think half the problem here is just the number of teams. If there was like 16 teams, I think this would go a lot easier, but there just isn't. So I think that's kind of the problem. And I think this year kind of shows that we are definitely approaching a kind of equal talent area where, like, yeah, the league could probably support 16 teams. I think there's definitely ways that they could do it. I think if they have some interesting expansion, I think they could actually pull this off. So, but anyways, moving on to this, yeah, as we were kind of mentioning, LA Thieves, Neum in, I think. Is that how you say his name?
Hmm. I think so,
Neum
yeah.
in, yeah, Neum in, Kenny is out. Cloud9, all four starters drop. New lineup is Encourage, Hyde, Neeraj, Okis. Yeah, this is not the most impressive. They're okay.
Hmm.
They're better. But see, this is the problem, right? It's just like, okay, yeah, we're getting rid of everybody, and then it's like, well, they're not that great. Well, okay, we're gonna do it again. Like that's the problem, right? So Toronto is the interesting one here. Kleenex has moved back to the. I think he was back to the SMG. He was off the SMG for like 2 games, and then that ended horribly. So he's back in the SMG. Kips is in, and Real is out, and apparently they are trying to find a replacement for Insight. That's the rumor from earlier today. So very interesting things with Toronto there. Again, this is probably the worst Toronto has looked in its. I mean, maybe with the exception of like early CDL, like the first
Hmm.
COVID weeks. This is probably the weakest Toronto has looked for a while. So yeah, it's kind of difficult to see what they're going to do there. What are your thoughts on these roster moves? Some of them happened already. We were supposed to cover them last week, but we weren't here last week. So what are your thoughts on these roster moves?
Yeah, yeah. So the Thieves one I think makes sense. Like just looking back on, right, like Thieves odds to win Major One, like between your model, my model, like the betting market, like Thieves were like the clear cut fourth best team there. And yeah, somewhat disappointing result finishing, top six. They did get, a somewhat unfavorable schedule with meeting, Vegas FaZe in that losers bracket. So sometimes, again, like majors can play out in a lot of weird ways. Sometimes your path isn't always nice. And I think that was the case for Thieves. But even with that, like they underwhelmed like throughout the major one qualifiers and at major one like you'd say okay this roster needs something else and I think it does make sense that Kenny is the odd man out and yeah Neum through 1 week has looked solid like LA Thieves 6-1 map count last week against some subpar teams so maybe it's a step in the right direction. I want to see it against, a Vegas FaZe or an Optic Texas or a team like that and see how they stack up. But so far, so good. The Cloud9 one is interesting. They obviously only won one series in the Major One qualifiers and then just got bounced immediately in the Major One itself. Their underlying numbers weren't great. Like they were pretty bad, but they still were winning maps here and there. I am a little surprised that they dropped everybody, and this is the lineup that they got. Like the consensus is that they could have gotten better challengers players, but maybe those challengers players just wanted to stay in challengers and try to, rack up a bunch of prize money, just crushing it in challengers tournaments, and I totally get that. So yeah, this is what we have for Cloud9. I wouldn't be surprised if, a couple weeks from now they have a brand new lineup as well. So interesting to say the least. But again, I think Cloud9 had to make a move. I just am surprised that it was this drastic. And then the Toronto stuff, again, like they've just been losing so much lately that, again, yeah, you just have to do something. Initially, the Kleenex to SMG, Real to Flex move happened. That didn't really work out for them last week. So now Real's hitting the bench for what they've said is the entire Major 2 qualifier period for Kips, and Kips has been a good challengers player for the Huntsman. Yeah, no, like the insight rumors is, those are interesting too. I think you can definitely say that he has not, lived up to what we expect from him. So we'll see if these roster moves work out. Like this is a team where, in general, when they make roster moves, it does tend to work out. The coaching staff, I think, does a great job there in Toronto. And yeah, like I do kind of expect this team to bounce back at some point. We'll see if it works with this new lineup, but a change definitely had to be made, I'd say, with all three of these teams. And sure enough, they did.
Mhm. Yeah, I think they kind of all needed to do something, and they did. I think so. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Here are your expected wins before week two. You go ahead and explain how you calculated this. This is all you.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm just punching in the schedule for each team, and I have expected win probabilities for every possible matchup. So if you see a team, if they have any black bars next to those their names, those are already banked wins. So you can see Paris Texas and LA already each have two. Vegas, Miami, Minnesota, Carolina, and Boston each have one, and the other teams haven't won yet. And then every other, colored bar you see is just another match and their win probability for that match. You add up the win probabilities and you get an expected wins number. So right now, this is where my numbers have this, and I know Robert, yours are a little different, but what I have, at least for now, before week two, the top six that auto qualify for the bracket pretty comfortably: Paris and Texas. Those teams should finish 8 wins, 9 wins, somewhere in that ballpark, fighting for the 1 seed. The next teams down, LA Thieves and Vegas FaZe, are each at about 7.5 wins, so 7 wins, 8 wins, somewhere in there. Again, should be comfortable to automatically qualify for the bracket. And then the next teams up, and this is where it gets interesting, right? Because we know those four teams are rock solid, really good teams. Not too worried about them in an 11 game round robin. But if you can get the fifth seed and the sixth seed, that is huge. And right now, my numbers say Miami and Minnesota are those teams. Miami and Minnesota both split their 2 matches last week, but Miami a big, big win over FaZe. And Minnesota was able to come out on top versus Cloud9 and looked really good against Optic. So in my model, those two teams look like, the next best teams after those four, and they each have a win under their belt already. So again, 6-ish wins for those teams, and that makes sense, right? If you're a top 6 team in the league, you're probably finishing 6-5 or better. So yeah, that's what I have for the top 6. The play-in teams right now I have as Ravens, Breach, Falcons, and Ultra, all kind of smushed in the same region. Like really, Ravens, Breach, and Falcons all hovering around the 5-win mark. And then Toronto, yeah, they've really, really taken a step back. So they've fallen down to 3.5 wins. And yeah, it's tough to say if that's even too high or too low, just because they're making all these roster moves as well. And then the teams that, as of now, wouldn't make it in my model are the two that you'd expect, with Vancouver Surge and Cloud9 New York. Each I'm projecting for about 2 wins, and that's, yeah, clearly probably not going to get you the 10 seed or better. So we'll see how this shakes out. But right now we have some pretty clear divides, like after the top four, and then kind of that next chunk of 5 is a really interesting one to follow, I think, moving forward. But still, 5 weeks to go, so this could shuffle a lot.
Yeah. Match previews. Here we go. Into the week's games. First match, FaZe versus Surge. Not the greatest one to start off with here. FaZe is minus 1,400 on the money line, minus 2.5 plus 100, minus 400 in the hard point, minus 350 in the search, and minus 500 in the overload. And we agree. We pretty much agree on this. We agree with the surprise. We agree with the with the book signs here. I have FaZe slightly higher. I don't hate some value on that 55, because basically you're getting even, so you're getting 5% diff. I'll take that. That seems fine. FaZe at this point kind of seems to like to just kind of crush worse teams. That minus 138, that's not value when you're putting 45% there. That's not worth it. Wouldn't also mind some FaZe Search and Destroy there in that too. I like it a bit more than you there, but you kind of like the overload a bit more than me. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I agree with you. For some reason, I think Surge are overpriced, which is weird to say because, they're considered to be the worst team or second worst team in the league. And like according to my numbers, Surge and Cloud9 are basically dead even for that spot, that 11th or 12th spot, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, FaZe like are a clear top 3 team in the league. Right now, my model has them as number 2, which might surprise some people, but yeah, I go Paris, then Vegas, then Optic third. But yeah, Vegas, they just have no weakness. Like their biggest weakness is hardpoint, but Surge, I think, have 2 hardpoint wins on the year. Vegas are the best Surge team according to my numbers and the best overload team. I always want to say control, but it's overload. And yeah, you look at the map set and what it might be, and it looks like Vegas should win this pretty easily. These teams played less than a month ago, and it was a dominant 3-0 from Vegas. So all signs point to Vegas here. I'm curious if they do anything weird with the map vetoes. I don't think they will, though. Like, we're still really early on in this qualifier period where I think teams are just going to play everyone straight up, right? Try to rack up as many wins as you can, as many map, wins as you can. Like that map win percentage is really important for tiebreakers. So yeah, I think Vegas phase, that is hard to say. Vegas phase 3-0 is really, really likely here.
Yeah, we're so used to Atlanta phase. Now it's getting used to Vegas phase. It's difficult, but second match on Friday, Riyadh versus Cloud9. Again, actually, that's a bigger number, right? Yeah, it's actually even bigger number, a minus
Yeah.
4,000. That's kind of nuts. Minus 2.5, minus 150, minus 600 in the hard point, 600 in the search, and 700 in minus 700, obviously, in the overload. Little more bullish on Cloud9 here. I think they could win a map, which is weird because Y is like I think Surge is clearly the worst team in the league, and like Cloud9, although they haven't won, there were some positive signs at least. Might be some play on Cloud9 here. Again, we're not going crazy here, but at plus 2.5, plus 110, I think there's lots of room to play it. Like again, what's the hard? We don't have spreads yet for at hard points yet, but like that's gonna be what a 50, 60 point spread. That's pretty nice. I'll take that. Like Riyadh has been far from a dominant team. Are they gonna win this game? Probably, but are they gonna like blow them out by 100 points in hardpoint? No, this Cloud9 team has actually been doing some decent things in hardpoint. So especially there, we actually both have Cloud9 as the favorites in hardpoint. Oh no, sorry, no, the plus 2.5. But again, yeah, much higher though than the market there by probably at least 15 points there in terms of that. So yeah, lots of maybe some room to work here for Cloud, maybe some value here on Cloud9. What do you see here?
I agree. I think it is tough with Cloud9 just because we only saw this new lineup play once last week and they did get swept. But like the map to map results weren't the worst thing in the world. And yeah, like Falcons aren't a great team. Like according to my model, they're seventh best in the league. They're like smack dab league average. And like, should a league average team be a minus 4,000 favorite against what we now expect, I guess, is like the worst team in the league? I say no. Like, I definitively no. I would say like the most likely outcome maybe is still a Falcons 3-0, but I don't know, man. Like we haven't seen it that much from Cloud9, and it's not like Falcons are coming off a great week either. Like they lost both of their matchups, didn't look great in either. They showed some signs of life against Paris, winning a hard point. That is really hard to do, but I don't know, man. Like Cloud9 were somewhat competitive against G2 in map 1 and in map 3. And Minnesota, according to my numbers, is a better team than Falcons. So Cloud9, if they can't quite get a map off of Minnesota, I think they can off of a team like Falcons. So it's really tough. Like it's a really, really tough pill to swallow when you're taking a team that's this bad that everyone is down on, and understandably so. Like none of these players have any CDL experience. We've only seen them play one series online. They didn't win a map, but at a certain point, like if every match they play is going to be a New York plus 2.5 at plus money, right? You're expecting like every series to be a sweep, or at least like half of their series they'll get swept, and half of the series they'll win one map. And I think that's just a little too confident, I think, right now to call that. So I like Cloud9 just a little bit. I think it is interesting. Hopefully they can win one map. Their search didn't look great last week, but again, that's a mode where you could see a team just randomly win a round 11 here or there. So I think Cloud9 can keep it tough. Just I think it's just a lot of respect on Falcons after not doing much a week ago.
Yeah, I think so, and I think there might be some value on Cloud9 there. Moving on, there is no numbers here because there is no lines. Yeah, I don't know why no one's posted. I think they smelled out that there was going to be a change with Toronto because when the lines came
Yeah.
up on Sunday night, there was nothing. So they seemed
Hmm.
to do that. So again, yeah, the numbers, the bar here was put 50% across, no big deal there. But we're just kind of projecting what it will be here. These numbers here are just all even. We've got Toronto about a 25% chance to win, and we've got the plus 1.5 actually accurately priced at about plus 100. So that's roughly about right. We've got Thieves as a strong favorite in the hard point and in the search, but less so in the overload. And actually, our numbers are pretty surprisingly close together here. If let's say that the number is like Toronto plus 1.5 minus 120, Thieves minus 1.5, minus 120. Would you take a bet on this one, or would you just leave it alone?
Yeah, that is tricky. I was trying to game out like what I think the money line price would be, just because in my head that's easier to compare one thing to the other. And in my opinion, right, Toronto I think will be about plus 350 or plus 400 to win the match. Just going off of like, there's another match we'll talk about later where it's Thieves versus Breach. And right now, Breach and Toronto are very close in my model. So I'm kind of like, okay, if Thieves are this big of a favorite versus Breach, they'll probably be about that big of a favorite against a new look Toronto team. But yeah, it really just depends on what you think of the roster move. Do you think it can help short term, or do you think it doesn't help at all? I think in general roster moves are good. So if Toronto were plus 1.5, plus 120, that's pretty close. I'd still say that's a no play for me, but I'd prefer the Toronto side if anything in that situation. But yeah, if Toronto, like the money line price would again probably have to be like, yeah, plus 400 or higher for me to be interested. And I think it is going to fall right along that number. So yeah, probably a stay away for me even when these lines come out. But yeah, Thieves looked quite good last week, only dropped the one map. This is a similar, level of opponent, so I think you're going to get a similar result. Like a Thieves 3-1 feels pretty likely here, but if the Toronto changes still, don't look like they're helping, like I wouldn't be shocked if this is a Toronto getting swept again, but just really hard to tell right now, especially when we don't know if Insight is still in the starting lineup or not. So, yeah, we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, this one is kind of a wait. Next up is again no numbers because we have no numbers for this one. Toronto versus G2. Toronto, that fabled back-to-back game. This one also very similar numbers too. Interesting, we have G2 and Thieves priced roughly the same. Again, obviously some small differences, but roughly the same. Toronto 25% chance, so about that's what 3-1 roughly. Plus 100, we might maybe we price this minus 120, minus 138. Priced at about plus 100. We got Minnesota favorites in the hard point and the search, but less so in the overload. Yeah, again, it depends what the number is. We have our numbers. It depends what the number comes back at. But if I see numbers kind of close to the model, I probably wouldn't bet this. Probably you agree with that sentiment as well?
Yeah, we'll see about this one. So I was again trying to find a number where I think this will land, but it is really, really hard to try to figure that out. So last week, Toronto played Ravens, and that was very close to a 50-50. I think Toronto was like a minus 138 on the money line. I think in this one, they'll definitely be an underdog. There's no doubt about that. But just how big of an underdog? Obviously, less than the game against Thieves, just because I expect Thieves to win a little easier than Minnesota. But yeah, I mean, this line could shift a lot from when it's first introduced to, Saturday morning after we've seen Toronto once. But yeah, again, I expect this maybe to fall Toronto plus 200-ish, plus 250, somewhere in there, just with how they've looked lately. And I think there's going to be some skepticism over if this new lineup will work or not. And Minnesota, they split last week, but overall, coming off of a good week with one win and almost a win against Optic if they didn't just choke away that game five. So, yeah, I fully expect Minnesota to win this one. Curious to see if Toronto can stay in a nice spot in overload because right now my numbers indicate that they're a top four team in that game mode. They have been slipping a little bit, but just anytime you get roster moves, like it might help one game mode, it might hurt another. So curious to see if maybe Toronto look a little better in hard points or in searches now, but their overload takes a step back. But I think in general you'd take that trade if you're Toronto. So yeah, a tough one to call. Again, we still need to see if Insight is in the lineup, but yeah, I think this could be definitely a more competitive game mode, even if Toronto versus LA the day before is not so much.
Yeah, I agree with that. Next up, Saturday match two, Thieves versus Breach. Thieves minus 600 on the money line. Thieves minus 1.5, minus 188. Minus 250 in the hard point, 275 in the search, and minus 250 in the overload. And that's roughly where we have it at. I don't really see a play here. I think minus 188 is priced properly. You have Boston a little higher. I just don't want to touch that. So Yeah, I'll leave that alone. What do you see a bet here, or are you just kind of leaving this one alone as well?
I do. I almost included this in our plays at the very end, but I just seem to be higher on Boston than the market and on your model as well. So I'm curious to see if maybe I've been too high on them. I do think they're very inconsistent, and that can be a problem at times, but it can also be a blessing. And I think we saw that last week. Like I took Boston to, cover 1.5 in what was a optic -2.5 spread, and Optic came out and won pretty easily. And I was sitting here thinking, like, yep, there's Boston just completely flopping against a team that is great that I think they can maybe fight with. And then I'm like, I'm sitting there with Boston +275 against Riyadh the next day, thinking, like, this probably is not going to go well. And sure enough, Boston win 3-1. So a very up and down team. These teams have played once before, I think. Yes. And Boston did take it to a game five before they fell. So Boston, I think, are good enough in map ones and map threes to make this interesting. The big question with them, as it has been this whole year, is their search and destroy. That is very problematic. They did win against Riyadh last week, but it was around 11, so not convincing. Even when they win those, a lot of times it does go to the round 11. And yeah, like Thieves are clearly a step above this Boston team. I just think maybe the market is taking Boston's inconsistency and punishing them for it more than they're giving them the benefit for it. Like I think Boston winning this series is totally live. I don't expect it to happen, but just with their up and down nature, I think if you're Thieves, you should be a little scared, right? So I think Boston can probably push this to a game five once again. And yeah, I'm sure I'll be sitting here on Saturday night thinking, oh, yep, Thieves swept them, and that's what I should have expected. But I don't know. I kind of like this Boston team.
Fair, that's fair. Saturday match three: Paris versus Carolina. Paris -500 on the money line, -1.5, -200. Paris -450 in the hard point, -188 in the search, and -150 in the overload. Yeah, I mean, I've got this roughly where it is. I like Paris slightly on the money line, but I'm not touching that in -500. -1.5, -200. I vaguely like Carolina in the hard point, but then I really love them in the. I love Paris in the search, which kind of gives them the edge in the thing. You're kind of roughly in line with market. Do you see kind of some value here, or no?
Not really. Yeah, I'm kind of all over the place. My model sees Paris map one as a value, which is kind of crazy because it is at -450. But when you just look at how often they win and by how much they win, it does make some sense. And Carolina, I'd say their weakest game mode probably is the hard point. Yeah, but Ravens search is really interesting, right? So they have the best win percentage in the league for what it's worth, 62%, which is 8-5 overall, which just goes to show that like there really isn't a dominant search and destroy team this year. They're pretty 50-50 across the board. But yeah, first in win percentage on search, according to my like grades that I give out for each team, they're only the seventh best team in search. And a lot of that has to do with like margin of victory. So they are winning a lot of round 11s and they're getting blown out when they lose. So that makes for an interesting game. And then yeah, Paris, for how good they are, like they are the best team according to my numbers, and I think according to most fans, like you'd say, the team that won Major One, that was the one seed, that won two games last week, like they are the best team in the league. Their overload is suspect. And sure enough, I have it as a 50-50. Like, I do think Paris needs to improve that game mode if they want to have sustained success throughout the year, because I think eventually some of these teams are going to catch up in hardpoint. And your search, although it has been improving drastically, like their search and destroy won them Major One, like it could be we're going through a hot period right now for Paris and that cools off. Can you make that up in overload? And I think they're a good enough team where they can do that. So for Carolina, I think the path is pretty clear that like you have to weasel out a couple search and destroy wins and then get that map three. Like the map three feels like a non-negotiable. But yeah, at the end of the day, like my model is a little higher on Paris hardpoint, a little higher on Carolina searches and overloads. Ultimately, that balances out to like where the market is. So probably a no play for me, but yeah, just curious to see how this one plays out if Paris can continue rolling these, subpar teams.
Hmm. Yeah. Last match on Saturday, Optic versus Miami. Optic minus 275 on the money line. Texas, Optic minus 1.5, minus 120. Minus 225 in the hard point, minus 138 in the search, and minus 200 in the overload. I kind of like Miami here, especially on the plus 1.5 and in map one. Other than that, not a lot of value on Miami here. I definitely wouldn't play Optic, but in Miami, again, Miami's very weird, right? You sweep phase and then you get 3-1 by Paris, the arguable top team in the league, right? So, like, those numbers don't really compute. Something went wrong there. They were competitive against Paris, but they just couldn't get anything going in that map for a hard point. I think that's kind of what happened. And they also could have won the map one hard point too. They came very close. So they struggled in the hard points, which is kind of their bread and butter. But yeah, I think putting something on Miami here is not a bad idea. Do you agree, or do you see more value on the optic side?
Yeah, no, I'm more in agreement with you than I'm not. I think if I had to take a side, I would take the Miami side of things. Yeah, Miami. So Optic are interesting. They are weak in nothing. Like their hard point is awesome, their search is awesome, their overload is awesome. They're not the best in any of those game modes, but according to my model, they're top three across the board in each of those game modes. Miami are very consistent as well, but they're more middle of the pack in everything, which isn't a bad thing because they have been playing a lot better lately. Like their major one was good. And I think, right, like you play Vegas and Paris last week and you split the series and you actually have a positive map count. Like I think you will take that if you're Miami. The problem is, right, now you get Optic Texas. So what are we going to get? It's tough to say like where Texas falls in that pecking order. But yeah, I think Miami are definitely good enough to make this a fight. Traditionally, they have against this team. So yeah, I'd love to see it. I think Miami are definitely good enough to force that game five. And honestly, if we get to that game five, like I think it's more of a 50-50. It looks like you have a little more confidence in Optic to win the searches, but yeah, I think Miami are just with the fact that they're solid across the board. We could look at a series where it's like each team wins their map pick. Like Vito's go clean, Optic wins their maps, Miami wins their maps. Who wins the overload? Right now, I give that edge to Optic pretty clearly, but Miami, again, still a good enough team where they could get the upset in that map three. That's what pushes it to the game five and ultimately gives them a chance to win the series. So I think this could be a really, really good one on Saturday night.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one as well. Yeah, this could be really good. Moving on to Sunday, Riyadh versus Carolina. Carolina is actually the favorite in this, minus 125, minus 1.5, plus 200. Riyadh is a slight favorite in the hard point, but Carolina is favorites in both the search and the overload. I actually have Riyadh as a bigger favorite here. My model really doesn't like Carolina that much. Oh, yeah. I mean, I like Riyadh, and I like Riyadh. Yeah, I mean the plus 1.5, but that's not really a playable thing though. Hardpoint is whatever, but I like Riyadh more in the search and in the overload against Carolina. Your model is kind of just riding the numbers. It's like slightly up on Riyadh, slightly lower on Ravens. Mine's taking a definitive call here. Do you agree with my call, or do you want to stay away from this one?
Yeah, no, I it is tough because my model is like right in line with the market, but I do think I side with you on Falcons if I had to pick one thing. And it's mostly due to the fact that like Falcons, although they went 0-2 last week, like that series against Boston, you would like to see them win, but those maps were really close. Like Boston did just get by in a lot of those. And I think you play that series out a lot, like Falcons win that series quite often. So I think maybe it's some recency bias against Falcons. Ravens did get a nice win over Toronto on Friday. That was somewhat unexpected. So I think last week is swinging these odds a little too far in the Ravens direction. But ultimately, yeah, I like this feels like close to a 50-50 for me. When you look at like what Ravens have done with this lineup online, like they look like a really solid team. They showed up at the major and it was not good at all. And Falcons kind of have been like solidly middle of the pack all year, had a decent showing at Major One. So yeah, ultimately, like I think these teams are both pretty close to middle of the pack. Falcons have slightly better odds, although right, it's really really close to 50-50. But just going back on like I think last week's results maybe influenced these lines a little too much. So yeah, in that case, I would prefer to side with Falcons, but this should be a really fun one to watch just due to the coin flippy nature of it.
Hmm. Yeah. Vancouver versus Boston. Boston minus 163 on the money line. Boston minus 1.5 plus 125. Boston the favorite in the hard point. Vancouver the favorite in the search, and Boston the favorite in the overload. Again, two of the worst teams. Not the two worst teams per se, but definitely bottom four matchup here. My model likes Vancouver here. My model thinks, I mean, Vancouver's not good, but it's not. They're my model has them over Boston, but you have the opposite. This is model warfare at its finest here. Vancouver, you've got Boston here with significant value on Boston. I've got value on Vancouver. So I've got the hard point at 50-50. I've got Vancouver as significant favorites in the search, but then we both got Boston in the overload. What do you see here? Are you sticking with Boston? You were sticking with Boston before. They cleaned up Riyadh pretty easily. Do you see them cleaning up Vancouver as well?
Yeah, so this is really, really interesting for a lot of reasons. Our models are completely at odds with each other. And you might remember Major One qualifiers. This was Surge's one win that they got was against Boston Breach. It did go to a
Mm-hmm.
game five. And yeah, it was pretty surprising at that time just because Surge had shown nothing before that, but obviously made the roster move. Since then, Surge have been better. Like if you just go back to January 1st, let's look at the Surge results. It is better than what they've been on the over the course of the year, but it's still pretty bad. And like I do think Boston over the course of the entire year, and if you just want to focus on their recent splits, like they're not a good team, but I think they are far better than Surge, like across the board. And honestly, like the thing that surprised me most, and I don't know, maybe you can explain it because you're really high on Surge in map two. I don't get why Surge are favored in Search at all. Like Surge are 3-8 on the year, which ranks 11th in win percentage. And according to my numbers, they grade out as the 10th best search team. So that's right in line. And it's not like Boston are great at search and destroy either, but they're at least 6-8 overall, ninth best win percentage, and they grade out as the ninth best team in search. So they are very solidly where they should be. And I don't know. I looked at the Surge results recently in Hardpoint and Search and Overload, but really focused on Search. And like it's been better since January 1st, but and like they got a nice win over LA Thieves last week. I just don't see it though. Like it's gonna take I think yeah probably two Search wins from Vancouver and some pickup in Hardpoint and Overload. The hard points are rough, like they are 2-12 on the year, 3-7 in overload. It's maybe more likely in that mode, but I don't know. I do think it's somewhat disrespectful to Boston to have it this low. I think there's a clear gap between, Surge and Cloud9 at the bottom, and then the next teams up from that. I'd have like Toronto and Boston, and then maybe like not Minnesota, who would be next? Probably Riyadh in that mix that and they're clearly a step above in my opinion. So yeah, we're at odds here. We'll see who comes out on top, but I'm at least happy that our models agree that the Boston map 3 makes some sense.
Yes, I think we both agree on that part at least. Second to last match of the week: Optic versus Cloud9. Optic a nice cool minus 20,000 on the money line. So if you have 20,000 in your betting account and you want to win $100, have I got the bet for you?
Yeah.
Optic, minus 2.5, minus 275, 1,400 in the hard point, 700 in the search, and 1,400 again in the overload. We can't agree on the number that big. There's no way the number should be that big. If you're thinking even remotely of betting Optic minus 20,000, stop listening to this podcast. But this is the thing, right? It's like looking at this here. If you're gonna bet anything on this, it's one map. At a certain point, Optic's not gonna care. They'll be like, whatever. We're gonna test out maps here at this point. We're testing out maps because we don't care. At that point, they'll be like, let's. And here's the flip side too. Let's play Cloud9 on their best map. Let's try it because it's a challenge for us, right? So this is the thing, right? Like, why would you Like you can get a not half bad option here. So no, like win a map, which to be honest, now is it likely? Yeah, probably not. It would be the hard point, I believe. We have that as the kind of best. It's the hard point or the search. It's one of those two. That's the best shot Cloud9 has. If you get to the overload, it's getting too late. So, but again, if you're going to bet anything in this, plus 2.5, plus 200, again, not a great bet, but it's way better than minus 20,000 in the top line there. Do you see that as well? Or are you gonna take a swing? You got 20 grand
Yeah,
to win $100.
no, I do see it. If I really squint, right, it's like it is really hard to make a case that there's any value on the optic side. And again, this just goes back to the fact of like how big should we make these spreads for teams that we think are the best in the league and teams we think are by far the worst? And yeah, what's the likelihood that that game ends in a sweep? And to me, it is really hard to put numbers on Cloud9 right now just because their lineup is completely different. We only saw it one time last week. They did get swept, but it was close. So it's like you can take a lot of different conclusions from that one series against Minnesota. But we know Optic are a clear step up. But yeah, at what price does it make sense for Cloud9? And I think plus 2.5, plus 200 is enough. Like we'd have it closer to even if you just go based off of our models. But again, I don't want to put too much stock in those. But yeah, it's like, could Optic just come out and be like, we've never played a black hard point this year, which is true. They are 0-0 on that map. Let's see what we look like against this, challengers team, essentially. Like that could totally be the case. Or yeah, search and destroy. You made a case for like Optic, their only map where they do not have a win on Search and Destroy, Colossus. They are 0-1. So yeah, maybe they're just like, let's try a Colossus here and see if that works. And maybe Cloud9 are still horrible at those maps and it doesn't matter and Optic win easily. But like you can make a case that that could happen, or that, I don't know, like Cloud9 are just a little better than what we think and we can't base everything off of that one match we saw last week and our priors about what these guys did in challengers. Like it might take some time for them to gel. It might take some time for them to win a map, but ultimately the price just is too good to pass up, I think. So I like Cloud9
Yeah.
a little more, price consideration wise in the earlier game that they have this week as opposed to this one because I think it is really likely that we see an Optic sweep, but I don't know. It's really hard to make a case that Optic is a valuable play in this spot as such huge favorites.
hmm Last match of the weekend should be a pretty good one. G2 versus FaZe. FaZe minus 225. FaZe minus 1.5 plus 110. FaZe minus 150 in the hardpoint, minus 163 in the search, and minus 200 in the overload. Yeah, my model actually has some slight value here on FaZe. I think it's arguable how you want to score the Minnesota Optic game. Do you want to say that Optic Minnesota was like, is it, oh, okay, it was Minnesota was really good and they just let the game slide? Or was it that Minnesota just kind of got really lucky for two games and then Optic came back and closed the door, right? I think my model is kind of leaning more towards it was maybe more just Minnesota, not Optic just kind of messing around and closing the door in the last three maps. I think there's some slight value here, especially at the plus 110, but it's about right. I think if I'm betting anything here, I'm probably betting FaZe minus 1.5 and not getting too cute with all this stuff. Again, we have FaZe as favorites in all three maps. Could there be a sweep? Yeah, maybe, but I don't know. I think a 3-1 here would be pretty would make a lot of sense for me. What do you see here?
I wish I liked Minnesota, and I think you can make a really good case that they are a valuable play here. But my model is just kind of steering me in the opposite direction. But it is really tough. So these teams have played three times already this year. Once Major One qualifiers January 18th, and they met twice at Major One, if you remember. And Minnesota have won two of the three matches. The first one in the qualifier was a 3-1 win for Minnesota. They only lost game one. They won game two in around 11, won a close overload, and then came back and won a 50-point hardpoint. they meet in round one of Major One, and Minnesota sweep Vegas, which like is pretty surprising. A lot of people, including myself, had Vegas as favorites to win the major, and they came pretty close. Like they were one, kill away from getting to the grand finals to face Optic. But yeah, losing in a sweep to Minnesota was not on the bingo card for me. I don't know about you, but that was a very like affirming result for Minnesota that they are a good team in this league and they can compete with these top end teams. And I think, right, you go back last week, right, against Optic, and I should mention, right, they met again later at Major One. Vegas weaseled out a Map 5 win and like made it through to place third overall. But Minnesota made it the distance, got fourth place, almost beat FaZe again. Like Minnesota, very, very competitive against this specific team. So that is worth noting. And you just look back last week, right? Like Vegas, little up and down. Minnesota, solid win, and should have beaten Optic. Like really, really had a great chance to beat an awesome team in Optic. So Minnesota consistently proving that they can win or at least keep these series close. But every now and then you get a weird result from Minnesota where you're like, that was maybe a little unexpected. So yeah, it is really, really hard to pinpoint down. Ultimately, I'm gonna trust my model and say, Vegas maybe aren't a play, but my numbers are at least steering me away from Minnesota, saying like, hey, I know the results in this specific series maybe haven't been favorable for Vegas, but they're still the better team. We play these series out enough. You should see Vegas win a lot more than Minnesota. And maybe this is finally the result where we get where it's like, oh yeah, here's FaZe. They look unstoppable. It's a 3-0 win or maybe at least a 3-1 win for them. That would do a lot, I think, for their just outlook moving forward. So yeah, a great, great match to end on for the weekend and super, super excited to watch.
Yeah. So moving on, Model Warfare, Major 2, Week 1. I'm going with FaZe minus 2.5 against Vancouver. I've got Miami plus 1.5 against Optic. And then I am going to take Riyadh versus Carolina. I don't love it, but I think it's definitely doable. What bets do you have for this week?
Yeah, my model really, really likes Boston again this week, so I'll just keep riding with it. So I've got them to win -1.5 against Vancouver. I just think there's a clear separation between Vancouver and Cloud9 and those next teams up, which I think Boston is a part of. But Boston had at least shown like somewhat good results, mediocre results throughout the year. And I think mediocre is better than bad. I'm also with you on FaZe -2.5 versus Vancouver. So really, like, I don't know. I just think the market for some reason is too high on Surge, even though they didn't win last week. They only played the once, but like, I don't know. Like they're better than, what they started as this year, but they're still not even close to league average. So I think there's maybe some value to be had on fading Surge, as crazy as that sounds. But yeah, and then I'm rolling with it with Cloud9. I know they aren't good. I know they didn't win a map last week. But yeah, against a league average-ish team in Falcons, I think that to win one map, like the +110 does make some sense. So we'll see how I go. I'm kind of all over the board with good teams and bad teams, but I don't know. These were just the three that made sense to me.
Yeah, makes sense to me. We both have that -2.5, so we'll see if that one works. And then here's the combined model plays. Again, Vegas money line -2.5, +2.5 money map 1. Boston map 3, Cloud9 +2.5 map 1, and then obviously FaZe -1.5 there against Minnesota. That's it for us. This will be out very soon, and then we'll be back for Major 2, Week 3, and that will be out by Thursday, February 26th. Other than that, yeah, we had a nice long episode today. This was good. So other than that, yeah, see everybody, and have a good week, and we'll see you next week.